G'day guys, Alec here from Better Music with Nathan. We're from the bass section here and we just want to have a chat to you about passive and active pickups and what they sound like and what they can do. Starting off, where you should be looking if you're first starting off playing bass, what sort of pickups you might want to be looking at.
It is a pretty big question. Where do we start with? Once you get past your favourite colour, active, passive, what do we do?
Second most important question.
Second most important question. Third most important is how does it look on?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just going to go over some real simple points about, like Alex said, the passive and active. I'll let Alex start with the passive and then we'll move across onto the active bass.
Okay, so today we're going to be using two of these Fender American jazz basses. We tried to get the basses as close as we could to one another so you could hear the differences between the passive system, which I've got here in my hot little hands, and the active system, what Noof has, or Nathan, sorry. I'm using the American Standard jazz bass, rosewood board. Pretty simple, you know, you see them all around the world being used. And I'll pass over to Noof to let you talk about what he's using.
Yep, so this is the American Standard Active Deluxe bass. It does look rather similar besides the colour, but what we've got in here is some active circuitry which we'll go over in depth really soon. Again, we're just trying to keep things very much the same. Just to go over it again, they are both rosewood fretboards. These are both Fender Standard strings. I think that they're 40 to 100. So we've tried to keep as much consistency as possible between the two. Also today, we're going to be running a Mesa Boogie M6 carbine head through a Mesa 4x10 4 ohm cabinet. We're not actually using the single 15 today. It is just a prop. It's a very expensive prop and it looks awesome. It looks so tough. I was actually clean shaven before I came in here today, so just to let you know how awesome these things are. Yeah. So we're going to keep all the controls exactly the same all the way through this demonstration or this talk. We're going to be playing both basses on the passive setting, and later on we will flick this up into the active position when I demo this a bit more in depth.
Just one other thing, we're running a Z5600 SE microphone at the front, and we're also using the Mesa Boogie's onboard DI. So that's a signal chain that you're getting through your speakers right now. Okay, so when you first walk into a music store and you go, righto, I need to buy myself a new bass, and you've got that question of if you're wanting to buy a passive bass or an active bass, what's the easiest way to find out?
Easiest way to find out is flip it over. So on the back of this bass, which is an active bass, you'll see this little compartment. This denotes that there's probably a 9-volt battery in the back of it. Sometimes you'll see a bigger compartment. Sometimes they take 2 9-volts, obviously giving you an 18-volt power supply.
That extra headroom.
Yeah, so some preamps do require that extra amount of power, whereas on Alec's bass, you'll see that there's nothing. It's a different setup. It's a little bit more traditional. I mean, we're talking about a design that came out of the early 50s, whereas this active circuitry, which came out of, say, the late 70s, when we started to explore bigger, newer tone shaping possibilities. But I'll let Alec take you through some of the features on the passive bass, just because it was the first one out there. Okay,
so with your passive basses, there isn't really much going on in the way of tonal shaping on the bass. The real important thing, and what I really like to do recommending beginners to look at passive basses, is because what you really get to learn how to do is get different tones from the passive pickups, or just the positioning of the pickups. If you'll notice, if I turn the front pickup all the way down, you get much more of a different sound, a much tighter sound than what happens if I turn the front pickup or the bridge pickup all the way up. Usually, in most cases, you'll find that you'll get much more of a boomier, bassier response from the bridge pickup, the neck pickup, and a tighter sort of sound for the back pickup here.
More of a growl kind
More
of thing.
of a growl, yeah.
In the back. It's also worth noting, I don't know if you guys could have heard that, when Alec was turning one pickup on and off, you would have heard a bit of humming or buzzing coming through. Don't worry, when you're buying your first bass, it doesn't matter if it's a $2 bass or a $20,000 bass. This is just what happens. It's just a hum from a single coil pickup. If we could just demonstrate that again, if you just turn off one of the coils, hear that? Yeah, that's absolutely normal. A lot of people will freak out about that. It's supposed to be there. It's in a lot of mixes that you've been listening to all your life, but you won't notice it because in the mix, it kind of disappears.
Yeah.
So think about all your classic 60s, 70s, 80s, and even modern music. It's if guys trying to drag out that natural, raw, vintage style tone, that hum is actually in the mix. You just don't notice it. But in a setting like this, it's going to be a little bit more prevalent.
You get a bigger frequency response with that hum in there. And if you notice, we've got both pickups all the way up. That hum isn't as present because these two pickups are kind of acting in phase to one another and cancelling out that hum. What you see on a humbucker pickup?
It cancels, bucks the hum.
Yeah, exactly.
Humbucker. Yeah, right on.
One other thing that you can do with a passive bass on board to shape your tone is most basses, passive basses, have a passive tone control. And what this is doing is it's rolling off the treble frequencies of the bass. With passive basses, all you can do is cut the frequencies or cut the signal from the pickups. So
you're not adding?
You're not adding.
You're only cutting.
Which is what you can do with an active bass, which
Sure.
we'll talk about. But you'll notice if I roll this back, the edge of the note kind of disappears, and that's those treble frequencies getting cut. Really trying to cut through, in certain areas, passive tone control is a really nice place to start. Then you can start mucking around with your pickups,
Okay, so what Alec is going to do now, we're just going to take you through some tonal variations just using the two individual tone control, volume controls that we've got for each pickup and how they interact with each other. Also keep in mind too, passive pickups, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, I find that they work with the tonal timbre of the bass a little bit better. You can hear the nuances of, say, mahogany, alder, swamp ash. There's a myriad of other timbers being used out there and a lot of great basses. These are alder.
Yeah.
That's an alder bass. But I'll let Alec take you through a few of these different settings.
Okay, great. So when I first pick up a passive bass and I don't know what I'm going to get, usually I find the nicest place to start is to crank everything and see what sort of sound I'm getting. It also depends on what sort of music you're playing as well, for what sort of tone, obviously. But I will crank both pickups up full and have the tone up full, and then have a play and see what I kind of think of the tone. Okay, cool. So I'm probably wanting a bit more of a boomy sort of sound because I'm about to rock up to my Latin gig, let's say. So I want a bit more presence in the low end. So I'm going to roll back that bridge pickup because that's going to give us a tighter, growlier sort of sound. And I'm also going to roll back the tone control, which, as we were saying before, is cutting away those treble frequencies. So let's see what that does. I've only rolled it back probably about a third. Each of us has been rolled back a third. So. Cool, that's getting closer to what I want. Maybe I'm going to take that tone control back a bit further. Cool, so I'm getting that sort of sound that I was after. The good thing about the passive circuitry as well is it's still reactive to how I play, You can't really hide behind a pickup if your sound from your fingers is still going to be coming through.
Our other big type of bass out there is the active bass, and this one, like we just explained, does have the 9-volt battery on board. What that allows you to do is boost the bottom end, boost your top end, really shape those mid-range frequencies. And don't be afraid, as a bass player of the mid-range, keep in mind too, it really helps you cut through the mix. I know when you start out, you want to scoop the mids and play really heavy stuff, and it does sound great in the bedroom, but you'll lose presence. But that's what this active bass will let you do. So what we've got here, let me just go over this real quick. On this particular bass, we've got a volume control, we've got a pan control. Unlike on the passive bass where we've got one control per pickup, this volume controls both, and the pan just lets us swing between the two. We can blend between the two. We've also got two stacked pots on this particular one, the top one being for treble, the bottom for bass. And in the mid-range, what this stack pot lets us do is find the mid-range frequency we either want to cut or boost, and go from there. Also, this particular model has a active passive switch. I'll actually use that a little bit later on to show you the difference in volume. That's another key point as well. Active basses, they are about 10 dB louder than, say, a passive bass. So keep that in mind. We'll go over that a little bit more shortly. No, that does not mean it's a better bass or worse. It's just something a little bit different. It's just the horsepower.
Another thing to be noted, each active bass's preamp is not set at the same frequency. So the bass response is not always going to be at 40 hertz boost or cut. You know, some preamps might have it a bit higher, some might have it a bit lower. So it really does make a difference when you're picking a bass out to really see what those controls do and if they're adding presence to where you want it to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And and we're going to keep talking about tone shaping. And again, tone is extremely subjective. There is no wrong, there is no right. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so I'm just going to go over this a little bit. I'll play a few examples, moving the controls around. So, real simple, everything is set to flat on this bass. I have selected the active position, so we're playing a full active preamp. So, just as it sounds normally by itself. Okay, it's nice and clean, as you would expect from a nice high-end bass like this. So I'm just going to move it to the neck position. So nice little deep thump from just the neck position pickup. If I play that same riff, but I'll play that same riff on just the back pickup. So you would have heard there, it's a little bit different. You've got it's a real smooth position, sound in the neck position, a little bit more growly, a little bit more aggressive in the bridge. Now, I'm going to just mess with the bass and the treble controls. Play a little bit of something for you. Extend the bottom end. Back to 0, I'll just boost the top end. Okay, I'll put the bass and the treble back to flat. And now I'm just going to mess with the mid-range controls. Okay. This is a particularly good setting where I've actually boosted the mids. You'll actually hear it jumping out of your speakers right about now. So it's going to get a little bit more aggressive. Things like slap bass, the disco era was coming out. Just if I run you through that really quickly with this guy, the sounds for slap on this, that just lets the active controls will let you actually just push those tops a little bit harder. You know, and then we can also extend the bottom end, and we can shape that mid-range as well. So far.
Active basses are so useful in situations where you're not using your own rig, you don't know what you're really doing on someone else's amp, or in studio situations as well where you want to be in control of your tone, you know, from the start point. They have that bass, treble, mid frequencies, they do give you a lot to work with. So do passive basses, but just the fact that you can boost and cut frequencies rather than just cut frequencies is a very big point that you should
it's super
be using.
handy. So like if you're a touring musician, and like Alec was saying, you don't know the rig, you might not get to play through a beautiful Mesa rig every single time. So if you've got your active bass, you're on the road, you can really shape your tone the way you want it to.
So with active basses, you know, there's a lot of things going on with them. And so with that sort of thing, there are a few things that can go wrong. Mainly, the biggest concern that most people have is when the battery starts to die. Your amp will start to get distorted and lose signal. It will sound pretty horrible. Most people come in to us and say, my amp's distorting, I need to buy a new amplifier.
My bass has stopped working, what do I do?
Yep.
It's freak out time.
Usually it's going to be your battery's dying. The best way to prevent that happening, unplug your bass when you're not using it. You know, always keep a 9-volt battery with you, because you don't want to rock up to your gig and then it just die out on the...
Yep, it's a great idea. I mean, if you're changing your battery once a year for your smoke alarm, you should be. Maybe tie that in with it. Always make sure you change your battery in your active bass as well. Even if you think, oh, you know, it's still working just fine, it's been in there for a year, it should be fine. Should be just means that at your next performance, you're going to have an overly distorted bass at a very low volume for about 10 minutes before it stops working completely.
So a lot of amplifiers have either 2 inputs or a switch. They can be anything from, like on our Mesa Boogie, active and passive, or I'll say pad plus or minus 10 dB. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, but what it's essentially saying is because an active bass has a higher output, it's got more balls to it when you plug it in. It does need that pad to not, you know, hurt your system or
yeah, so it just pulls it back a little bit, just stops it from peaking out. Some active basses, like we said, it's a 10 dB increase in volume. Sometimes it can be a smidge more. There are basses out there that do have a bit more kick to them. But like I said, we covered this a little bit earlier, where we're running in the passive mode for the moment on this particular amp, just because it is a 10 dB drop.
So let's hear what it does.
This is an active bass with that passive position.
No, it's switching it to active, so that pad, that minus 10 dB, has just come into effect. So you can hear the volume of it's dropped quite dramatically, and that really does help at the front end of the amp, the preamp, so you get nice tonal control over what's happening.
Having said that, on some all-valve amps, like I've done with some of my active basses, I purposefully will drive my active bass a little bit harder into an all-valve amplifier. It does create like a little bit of grit, but it's not always what you're after. It depends on the style of music. If I was rolling up to a jazz gig, I probably wouldn't do that. I would never get booked again. But that's something you'll experiment with.
Tone's such a subjective thing. You really have to go home and do your research before you make the decision, you know, oh, I'm definitely an active bass player, or I'm definitely a passive bass player, because, well, like both of us, we own both, and they have different roles for what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, it depends on the application. I mean, if you're just starting out on your bass journey, whether you choose to get an active or a passive bass to start with, inevitably you're going to end up with the other one eventually. Whether your parents want to hear that, or your wife or your husband, That's just what happens.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's in the fine print.
It's science. It's science.
Yeah, that's it.
Active bases comparatively are generally just a little bit more than, say, a passive base. And of course they're always going to be a little bit more expensive. You've got a tone circuit. You've basically got like a little tone computer running inside of here. Inside of a passive base, it's a lot more simple circuitry going on inside there.
Thanks heaps, guys, for joining us on this little video. If you've got any questions or comments at all, please leave them below the video, or give us a call, or send us an email. Drop by our website, bettermusic.com.au, and we'll try and help you out with anything that we can. Till next time.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
And you got to make the face.
The bass.
The bass
I'm playing
face.
bass. It's happening anyway.